He pretended to sleep to test the maid, but it was her mysterious whispers that left him frozen. Imagine this: a massive ranch in Montana, where the winter wind howls like lost ghosts. On the balcony, Daniel Mercer, 32 years old, owner of thousands of acres of land, thousands of cattle, and a mansion as grand as a palace, is living the kind of life everyone believes to be perfect. But the truth is far from it. 3 years ago, an outbreak of disease took away his wife and young son. Since then, the luxurious house has been nothing but an echo chamber of ghostly memories. And within that crushing solitude, a terrifying secret is about to surface, beginning with a whisper in the night that will make him question everything. Trust me, you have never heard a story like this before. If you are curious about what lies behind that whisper, stay with me until the end. And do not forget to like and subscribe so you will not miss the next secrets. Daniel buried himself in work, buying more land, expanding his herds, stacking ledger books into towering piles, as if money could fill the hollow left by loss. But when twilight painted the prairie in purple hues, the bitter truth returned. The vast house was nothing but silence, and his heart remained a frozen desert. The wind howled, cutting through to the bone, yet it was still warmer than the loneliness that clung to him. Daniel stood motionless, letting the darkness swallow the land until, "Mr. Mercer," a soft voice called out. Daniel spun around. In the wooden doorway stood a small figure, Hannah Whitmore, the maid who had arrived less than 3 weeks ago, barely 20 years old, her blonde hair tied neatly, a plain brown dress making her look out of place in the massive ranch house. Her grey-blue eyes lowered, avoiding the master's gaze. "Dinner is ready, sir. Tonight there is beef stew and freshly baked bread." Her voice trembled, nearly lost to the wind. Daniel gave a faint nod, though his eyes stayed taut as a drawn bowstring. This little maid seemed to carry something he could not name, a secret or a fear. "Bring it to the study," he said hoarsely. For an instant, as Hannah bowed, Daniel caught the faint quiver of her lips, as if she had been about to say more, then forced herself to stop. A shiver ran down his spine. For the first time in years, a strange feeling crept into the silence of the house. But what was it? Hope or danger? "Yes, sir." Hannah bowed again, then quietly slipped through the door. Daniel remained still, gazing at the first stars flickering in the sky. Oddly, the image of that timid maid lingered in his thoughts, like a mirror reflecting his own loneliness. She moved about the house, almost invisible, as if afraid to disturb the lingering ghosts of the past. When he entered the study, the firelight flickered against the rows of bookshelves. Daniel opened his ledger. Numbers, land, cattle, profit. To him, wealth meant control, and control was the only thing he believed would never betray him. The door creaked. Hannah stepped inside, a tray trembling in her hands. A steaming bowl of stew, fresh bread, a clear glass of water. Her slender fingers shook slightly as she set each item down. "Thank you." Daniel's voice, unexpectedly, was gentler than usual. Hannah lowered her head, but her eyes caught on a framed photo resting on the desk, Eliza in her wedding gown, holding little Samuel. Just for a moment, the cold room seemed to breathe warmth again. "You once had such a beautiful family," she whispered before biting her lip, realizing she had spoken too much. Daniel's eyes darkened. They once were. Her cheeks flushed, and she quickly bowed and left. Daniel ate in silence, the food tasteless on his tongue. His gaze drifted back and forth, sometimes to the photo, sometimes to the closed door. That night, he worked until late. And then, a faint sound from the kitchen made him pause. a voice, gentle, whispering. Daniel crept down the dark hallway, stopping at the kitchen door left slightly ajar. A weak glow of oil light spilled through. Through the crack, he saw Hannah rinsing the last of the dishes. But it was not the chore that froze him. It was the words slipping from her lips. "Tomorrow I will sweep the sitting room, even though Mr. Mercer never uses it. And that silver set, it must be worth an entire shop. I have to be more careful." Daniel held his breath. His heart pounded. This maid was not simply a timid girl. The trembling voice of the day was gone, replaced by another Hannah, mysterious, calculating. He forced himself not to make a sound, but only one question echoed in his mind. Who was she, really? Endar. Her voice caught in her throat. Hannah's hands gripped the basin tight as she whispered to herself, "Do not cry, Hannah. You are still lucky. You have a roof over your head, a job. Mr. Mercer is stern, but he is fair. It is just those eyes, as if he is staring into another world." Daniel's chest clenched. She had named the very truth he never admitted. The ghosts inside him had never left. He stepped back, hiding himself deeper in the shadows. The following night, Daniel tried something different. He stayed in the study until late, letting the fire burn down to embers. He slumped into the armchair, closed his eyes, and pretended to sleep. The door creaked. Soft footsteps. Hannah entered, carrying a wooden tray. She cleared the dishes, then paused beside him. A small hand gently drew a wool blanket over his shoulders. "Poor man," she whispered, "working yourself to exhaustion, but that will never bring them back. I know that feeling. I once tried." Daniel nearly sat up, but he stayed still, listening. Hannah walked to the fireplace, stirred the dying embers, and her gaze lingered on the photo on the desk. "Mr. Mercer, you had such a beautiful family. I hope one day you find peace. The way you look at them when you think no one notices, it breaks my heart. I know what it is to lose everything. But you are still here, still alive. And to live must mean something." She turned back, stopping just beside his chair, and whispered, "Good night, sir. Tomorrow will be another day." The door clicked shut. Daniel opened his eyes. Inside his chest, another kind of fire had sparked. Faint but real. This quiet girl, who drifted like a shadow in the daylight, carried a depth he had not imagined. The next nights, he repeated his game of falling asleep. And Hannah, like a secret, appeared again and again. Some nights, she spoke softly of how to polish the windows, how her mother once taught her to fold the tablecloth. Some nights, she only added wood to the fire or adjusted his blanket. But always, every single night, her gaze lingered long on the photo of Eliza and Samuel. And Daniel, lying still in the dark, had only one question burning in his mind. What was this girl really hiding? On the third night, Hannah set a small tin box on the desk, her voice trembling but firm. "Your hands? They are cracked from the cold. This is ointment my mother made. Beeswax, herbs, it helps the skin heal quickly. I hope you do not mind." Daniel clenched his fists beneath the blanket. He wanted to rise and thank her, but he held back. A part of him did not want to shatter the fragile peace surrounding them. On the fifth night, Hannah's voice was different, more open, almost a confession. "Mrs. Gaines told me, you built all of this with your own 2 hands. My father would have admired that. He always believed America was a place where one could forge their own destiny. But mistakes destroyed my family." Her words faltered, then rushed out quickly. "Still, I am grateful. Having work here is a blessing. Many girls on the train with me were not so lucky. I heard one was tricked into a saloon in Denver. That could have been me." Daniel sat frozen. This small girl carried a strength he had never witnessed before, and with each whispered word, she was not only dusting the house, she was mending his heart. But the seventh night shattered the rhythm. Hannah entered with a tray in her hands, but her steps were unsteady. Her cheeks burned red, sweat glistening on her forehead despite the freezing wind outside. She set the tray down, her hands trembling, then collapsed, nearly falling. "It is just a little cold," she gasped. "I will finish the work, then rest. Hannah, you must not be weak." Crash. Daniel's chair flew back. For the first time, he broke the act of pretending to sleep. He rushed forward and caught her just in time. "Hannah!" His voice was sharp, urgent, no longer cold. Her grey-blue eyes widened in shock and shame. You knew, all along." Daniel gripped her shoulders. "You are burning with fever. You cannot go on like this." In the dim firelight, the distance between them suddenly felt more real than ever before. "And I am fine," Hannah whispered weakly. "Please do not tell Mrs. Gaines. If she thinks I cannot manage, sit still." Daniel's voice was firm, leaving no room for refusal. Mrs. Gaines entered, her eyes taking in the scene at a glance. "Fever. I saw her pale at supper. This girl thinks she is made of iron." "I do not want to be a burden," Hannah murmured. "A burden? Falling down only makes more work for others," Mrs. Gaines snapped. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Send Tom to fetch Dr. Clayton immediately." Mrs. Gaines frowned. "At this hour? For a maid with a little fever?" Daniel lifted his head, his tone unyielding. "She is not just a maid. She is mine. Go." Hannah flushed crimson. Her lips trembled. You knew everything, all the things I said, while you pretended to sleep. I am such a fool." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes softening. "No. I found it kind, kinder than anything I have deserved." Tears slipped down Hannah's cheeks, silent but burning. An hour later, Dr. Clayton arrived grumbling. After a thorough examination, he declared, "Exhaustion, nothing more. Rest for a few days, and she will be fine. Not fatal." He shot Daniel a look, half teasing, half sympathetic. "Strange. To see you so worried over a maid. Perhaps you finally care for something besides land and cattle." Hannah was taken to her small room. The house sank into quiet. Alone in the study, Daniel's gaze fell upon the tin box. A small gift, yet filled with thoughtfulness. A girl with nothing, still thinking of others. Still gentle with a man who had lost everything. And for the first time in years, Daniel saw clearly. He had been given more than he ever gave. And over the next 3 days, Daniel insisted Hannah rest, ignoring her protests and her fear of losing the job. Mrs. Gaines only sighed. That girl has been pushed around her whole life. She cannot believe anyone truly cares for her. On the 4th day, Daniel knocked at her door. Hannah sat propped against pillows, sewing an old piece of cloth, her face still pale. Seeing him, she scrambled to rise, but he raised a hand. "Stay seated." Then he drew a chair close. "How are you feeling?" His voice was low, warm. "Much better. Tomorrow I can work again, I promise." "No," Daniel cut her off. "Only when the doctor agrees, not sooner." He hesitated, then added softly, "I owe you an apology." Hannah blinked. "An apology? For what?" "For pretending to sleep, and hearing all the things you never meant me to hear." Her cheeks burned, and she hid her face in her hands. "Oh God, you heard it all?" "I heard it all." Daniel nodded. She groaned softly, overcome with shame. How humiliating! No. His eyes gentled. What you said was light. Hannah, in a matter of weeks, you have given me more than this entire estate ever has. Her eyes shimmered with tears. She whispered, I only did not want you to live forever in that loneliness, because I know what it means to lose everything. Daniel reached out and clasped her slender hand. When you are well, I do not want to see you scrubbing floors anymore. I want you to be the head housekeeper. The work is lighter, the pay higher. You deserve it. Hannah stared, stunned, her lips trembling. But I've only been here a few weeks. And yet you have done more than those who have been with me a lifetime, Daniel replied, rising to his feet. As he moved toward the door, her voice called softly behind him. Then, you were awake every night? Daniel paused, the corner of his mouth lifting. Every night. The door closed quietly. Hannah buried her face in her hands, overcome with embarrassment. But for Daniel, for the first time in years, there was a fire in his heart beyond the fireplace. A fire with a name, hope. That winter was harsher than any year before. In early February, the sky over Montana hung heavy with thick grey clouds, warning of a fierce blizzard. Late in the afternoon, Daniel rode out to check the pregnant cattle. Snowflakes drifted at first, but in less than an hour, the wind screamed, snow lashed against his face, and the entire field vanished into a white void. Daniel could hardly see a path forward. Hours later, he staggered back toward the ranch, his clothes frozen stiff, his body numb. Each step dragged like carrying a mountain on his back. When the kitchen door burst open, a scream rang out. Oh my God, Mr. Mercer! Hannah rushed forward, her face pale. She caught his nearly collapsing frame and pulled him toward the fireplace. His hands were chalk white, his fingers stiff with cold. Hannah dropped to her knees, rubbing his hands between her own small palms. Her voice shook, yet it carried unyielding strength. No, I will not let you slip away. Hear me, Daniel. Hold on. For an hour, she and Mrs. Gaines worked in turns, pressing spoonfuls of hot broth past his chattering teeth, piling on heavy blankets, kneading his joints to bring the blood back. When searing pain racked his body, Hannah never let go of his hand, whispering again and again, You are home now. You are safe. Just rest. Please do not give up. No. In the haze of delirium, Daniel clung to that voice as his only anchor in a sea of snow. Darkness pressed all around him, but Hannah's whispers pulled him back, binding him to life. When he opened his eyes, pale daylight filtered through the frost-coated window, and the first thing Daniel saw was not the ceiling, not the fire, but Hannah, asleep in a chair beside the bed, her small hand still clasped tightly in his. A strange warmth surged through him, not the cold of the blizzard, not the emptiness that had haunted him for 3 long years, but warmth, the warmth of another life tied to his own. For the first time since losing Eliza and Samuel, Daniel Mercer knew one thing for certain. He was still alive. Not merely existing, but truly alive. Wells. A few weeks later, a dance was held at the neighbour's ranch. Violins played lively tunes, laughter filled the bright hall. Daniel entered as the master of the land, sharply dressed, drawing every gaze in the room. Yet he felt hollow until he saw Hannah. She stood alone in a corner, in a simple blue dress, no makeup, no jewellery, but it was that very simplicity that made her shine. Daniel did not hesitate. He walked straight to her, extending his hand. Miss Whitmore, may I have this dance? Hannah flushed scarlet, shaking her head. No, I cannot. Everyone will stare. Let them stare. His voice was calm. leaving no room for argument. She placed her hand in his. The music rose. They stepped onto the floor. At first her steps were clumsy, then suddenly she laughed, a clear, ringing laugh that turned every head. In that instant, Daniel felt a burden lift from his shoulders. When the song ended, he whispered, "One more." She agreed. Together, they forgot the world beyond the dance floor. But the world did not forget them. Gossip spread like wildfire. The master is marrying the maid. She only wants to climb up. Mercer is blinded by loneliness. At the market, at church, in the general store, every glance carried a whisper. Hannah heard it all, felt the coldness return. Old fears surged back of being used, judged, cast aside. One night, she quietly packed her things, planning to slip away before dawn. But as she opened the door, a tall figure stood waiting Daniel, silent in the dark hallway. "You were going to leave," he said, voice low. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not want to bring shame to you." He stepped forward, taking her hand, eyes burning. "Let them talk. My whole life I lived by other people's opinions now. I will live for what is real. You pulled me out of that frozen house. I will not lose that because of idle gossip." She shook her head. "You deserve someone, your equal. I have found her." His words came slowly, firmly. He drew her into his arms, whispering with fierce tenderness, "Stay, not as a maid, but as my partner. Be my wife." Hannah's tears fell this time, with a trembling nod. "Yes, I will." The wedding was held beneath the whispering pines, where Eliza and Samuel rested. Before the ceremony began, Daniel laid his hand on their gravestone, murmured a farewell, and lifted his head to walk forward. Hannah wore a simple white dress, no lace, no jewels. But when she placed her hand in Daniel's, her eyes shone brighter than the sky. As the minister spoke the vows and declared them husband and wife, Daniel bent and kissed her a kiss both tender and complete, opening a new beginning. Neighbors murmured, some nodding, some scoffing, but Daniel no longer cared. For years, living by their gaze brought him nothing but loneliness. Today, for the first time, he felt whole. Hannah, once just a shadow in his vast house, was now his wife, the one to walk beside him. On their wedding night, Daniel whispered, "Tomorrow will be a new day." Hannah smiled. "And this time, we will face it together." If you want more stories as moving as this one, do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. The next video will surely surprise you.